Look, there's a lot of heavy information, some of it really positive this week. Also, though, really, intense. And there's fears, there's concerns. My 17-year-old son is concerned there might be a draft. We're living in just incredible times. I'll be honest with you, I'm feeling more stressed and pressured than, certainly I was years ago. Now, some of that's my own doing. I decided to run guys for president and try to run a nonprofit. But we're all doing that, right? We're all working 2, 3 different jobs. And then we're trying to figure out ChatGPT. And is this even helping me with all of that stress? What's happening to our brains? I think so much about the health of our bodies. But did you realize how much of your body's health is being driven by your brain? That is the focus of my next guest, Dr. Patrick Porter. Take a look at this.
Dr. Patrick Porter is an award-winning author, educator, researcher, and speaker.
You're also the Dean of Mind-Based Studies at the International Quantum University of Integrative Medicine.
Somebody that has spent over the last 30 plus years researching and evaluating the function of the brain.
With over 30 years of experience, 500 plus keynotes, and best-selling books, he's pioneering brainwave tech to help unlock our mental potential.
I don't think we have a mental health crisis. I think we have a physiological crisis. People are sitting too much, they're not moving, they're not breathing, they're not eating right.
When you have a positive thought, you're actually generating more mitochondrial energy.
7 generations of our ancestors are influencing us. It's not that we can't change it, it's that if we go on default mode, which means if we go into stress, that means we're reacting to our environment, we're not interacting with it, then our genetic predisposition will show up. But we have the power to change 80% of that.
Our bodies really haven't changed since we were being chased by saber-tooth tigers. When these bodies were running around 100,000 years ago, we'd have stress effects happen maybe 4 or 5 times a week. Now, because of technology, we're having stress effects happen anywhere between 4 or 5 times before breakfast. Your brain only knows this moment in time.
Right.
And if we can get into this moment in time and realize that we are spectacular beings of light and energy and vitality, and we start sharing that message with other people, we'll live in a world of light, energy, and vitality.
Powerful, man. That's powerful.
He's a co-author of this fantastic new book, Brain Fitness Blueprint, integrating ancient wisdom and modern technologies for peak performance. Dr. Patrick Porter, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Del.
It's really great to have you here. We have gotten to share the stage many times across the country speaking to people. I love this book and I love your message, and reading this book made me think, as I said, introducing this, we think a lot, we're really starting, especially those of us that are awake, we're really starting to focus on our health. There's all sorts of people getting very serious about diets and their exercise and, what am I feeding my stomach, and we are using our brain to pick the best diets and our brain to figure out, what vitamins are in our brains, am I going to do stem cells or not? But we're not thinking about how healthy is my brain, which you point out might be one of the greatest determinations of your actual physical health.
Yes. I mean, your brain controls, are you having a stress response? I mean, are you taking those vitamins saying, I'm going to take them so I don't get sick? Well, then the brain's making you sick because the brain can't process a negative. But if you're taking them to be healthy, then...
So you're even saying, this is almost like a form of placebo effect,
Yes.
right? Like the thought system when you're doing these things is actually affecting the value and what you're getting from them.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about science now is this isn't religion. They don't have to believe me. They can go to the science literature. Your words change 3,200 gene expressions. So when you're sitting there at the table, when you say a prayer over your food, now they know that what you're doing is you're upregulating yourself and the food, because there's this biofield around us that actually changes our environment. This is not religion. This is not something, it's called the transport electron chain, the electron transport chain. Everything we eat, think, experience, and is around us is changed to energy. So now it's, what are we doing with that energy? And that's why when you talk about when the AI segment was so scary, I mean, we are the first generation that our kids are more stupider than we are.
Right.
I mean, that's never happened before. And they've done college, like they showed, I was on Fox News being interviewed because they let college students use AI. And they actually were dumber than the ones that didn't, because they're letting technology tell them. And our brains are literally being rewired, not for information, but where do we go get the information? So one day they take away the information, what's going to happen?
Right.
They're not thinkers anymore. We're all taught what to think, not how to think. So this is a brain game. And just to give you one example, let's say you wake up in the morning to an alarm clock. Most people do that. They hit their alarm clock 3 times. Well, that sends a cascade of effects happening to the body. Your body's already, all the muscles are full of sugar. There's no place for your new stress to go because you just had a stress response. Your liver pumped out 25 grams.
This happened just from the moment my alarm rings. I'm sending my body into a stress response.
Yes, and immediately your insulin has to kick in. A cascade of new events happens. The body has to mobilize insulin to store that sugar into the adipose tissue of the body. 25 grams. So you just ate a candy bar while you were sleeping, but you didn't get to enjoy it, but your body got to store it because later this body that's been around for 200,000 years says we're going to have a famine down the road. We need this food later. Most people are running around like a refrigerator with a year's worth of food on their back, and they don't realize it. It's not what you eat that makes you fat. When I was in People magazine, they said, "Why don't you have a diet?" I said, "It's not what you're eating. It's what's eating you." How do you look at food? There are people we all know that eat total junk, but they're not fat because they look at food differently. They think about food differently. They have an active lifestyle. Maybe they got lucky in the genetics of whatever happens with our body, but the reality is that your thinking. In fact, MIT just proved this actually about 14 weeks ago. They said that every thought you think goes 10,000 miles away from the person having that thought. And that thought goes into a web that actually interacts like the World Wide Web. So we're talking about consciousness now. How can we, and they said that no person arises, you don't have arising thoughts. Those thoughts arise within us based on our environment, based on what's going on. So the stress response, when people look at the world media in the propaganda machine, because we're not watching news anymore.
Yeah.
We're watching a performance.
Yeah.
They're producing the news instead of telling us about the news. And it's all fear-based. I always tell people, if you're out there right now and you're too happy, if your life's going too well, just turn on CNN.
Yeah,
you'll be miserable in 5 minutes. Because our people look at life as it's happening to them.
Right.
My job with Brain Fitness Blueprint and Rashika Sakri, my co-author, is to tell people life happens through you, through your eyes, through your ears, through your experience. Take an active role in what you're doing because your brain plays a major part in that, and it tells the rest of the body what to do. And like Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book Biology of Belief, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
He was the one who said and really told people, hey, your thoughts control the destiny of your biology. Your destiny is not in your genes. Your destiny is in your lifestyle. I mean, how many ancient cultures keep the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters? They keep it with the elders.
Yes.
So obviously there must be some problem we're having with our lifestyle.
Right. It's amazing. How do you bring up, first of all, I love at the end of every chapter, you sort of have let's reflect on, some of the issues we might have, and then let's think about the solution. So it's really active. You lay out thoughts just as beautifully as you just did there. But, in this world, like most of us have, CNN's on or,
Yes.
Fox going on in the background, right? We get in our car and literally the radio, usually news is just giving us bad information everywhere we go. And there is a lot of bad information.
Yes.
Are we talking about like tricking your mind to believe you're not in this hellhole that sometimes we think we're seeing? Like how do we do
A really
it?
wise man about 2,000 years ago said, be in the world but not of it.
Right.
When you think about being in the world, but you don't have to play a part in it. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to act on it. The TV has many dials. The internet has many places to search. Barnes & Noble has different sections of the bookstore. I mean, you have to choose intentionally what you're being fed, just like you choose what's on your table. When people go, well, what do you mean that's all this junk in my food? Who put it there? Well, they're making money off it.
Yeah.
So you can vote with your paycheck. And, we have to be true about things, but you don't have to be sucked into it. I don't have to turn on the news to know if I'm going to have a good day today. Right. Every morning I wake up, it's a new day in school. I should wake up a little nervous. Most people crush that by having coffee first thing in the morning. These are simple things we tell them in the book.
Oh man, you're going to go after my coffee.
No, you can have your coffee 2 hours after waking, but in the morning you should wake up with norepinephrine, dopamine, and cortisol. You should be a little nervous. This is a new day, a new discovery. It's like school. What's going to happen today? But if you didn't clean out the glia cells through sleep, opening up the glymphatic, this system of the body that if you and I were in medical school in 2015, wouldn't even know about.
Right.
But a Denmark physician's doing a sleep study in 2015 and finds out that we have this whole system that cleans out the brain. We didn't even know about it. Most doctors don't even know about it. They think sleep's a luxury. No, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
That's why, sleep is a sport. You know, how are you sleeping? People have watches, rings, and they score. They get on social media. They tell people, I'm now sleeping 6 hours, 8 hours. You know, and they're being told all the wrong information because sleep isn't about time in bed. We did our study with coal
I
miners.
discovered it actually. I think I said on the show once or twice. I got I went hiking and camping with the kids, so I got like a Garmin watch. Didn't know it did sleep, and I discovered since it was on, I am not getting REM sleep. I am lightly sleeping. I stopped wearing it at a certain point because it was telling me every morning you're gonna be exhausted today. It was just a terrible mantra, I think to the point, you know.
Right. So the thing is that there are certain things we point out in the book, like sleeping. If the listeners are out there, one key thing, you don't have to own BrainTap to do this, the technology. You can lay in bed when you're done doing everything you're going to do in bed, because we do other things besides sleep there. You know, when you're done with all of that, lay your head back on the pillow. Nobody needs to know what you're doing. Breathe into the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 8. Release your body's tension. Our body's an electrical system, and that tension builds up. If we go to bed too fast, there's something called latency in those sleep scores. Most people go, I don't need to help sleeping. I go to sleep really fast. That's really bad.
Really?
You need to unwind the system. So the breathing process does that. It unlocks. When you breathe in, you're turning on something called the sympathetic system. This is the fight or flight that most people's locked. They wake up in the morning fearful and stressed. They go to sleep fearful and stressed, and they don't get any sleep. They're in bed like the coal miners I was talking about. 2 minutes was maybe most of them got 10 hours in bed. They weren't sleeping, they were in bed. So it's very different. And so when you unlock the nervous system, breathing out to the count of 8, you turn on the parasympathetic. The only recovery happens when you're in parasympathetic state, which your body knows how to regulate. Because let's say that we were being chased by that saber-toothed tiger we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. Then we made it. We actually are the genetic ancestors of a bunch of paranoid schizophrenics. They didn't jump off the cliff. They didn't get eaten by the tiger. You know, all of that genetic information's inside of us. So we have to realize, is that my information or is it somebody else's information?
Right.
Because our brain was not designed for this day and age. I mean, even our grandparents. I still remember my grandmother got in my car. I got an X5, and this was years ago when they first came out with GPS in the cars. And the car said, "You're going over the speed limit," you know, because I had it set to tell me.
Yeah.
She goes, "You need a car to tell you that?" And I said, "Yeah, because I'm so busy thinking,
right.
You know, so I don't get a ticket." And she goes, "I've never had a ticket." Well, she has, but you know, when you're 93, you'll give them some breaks. But you know, we lean on technology a lot today, and it can be good and it can be bad. But we have to, that's one of the 4 T's really, you know, that can cause brain. Technology can be a good thing or a bad thing. And unfortunately, a lot of people are using technology in the worst ways. You know, it's not a good master. It's a good servant.
Well, I mean, and you point out in the book, you make, you know, and it's really, we can't change something we're not aware of, right? And it's like I said, we're doing all this thinking about all the problems in the world. We're even thinking about all the problems in our body, but we're not paying attention to what are we feeding our brains? What are we thinking about?
Right.
And, you know, you give us steps in this book to just become aware of what thoughts you had while you're eating, why you're choosing what you're choosing, so that we can get back in control. And something I talk a lot about really is, you know, both you and I have said personally, like I grew up with a father that taught me to meditate. Mm-hmm. It's a huge part of what I think makes it possible for me to do these things that I do. People say, are you afraid? Are you stressed? It's like, you know, do you get worried? I mean, honestly, no, because I've been taught to be able to just clear my mind, get rid of all the chatter. I watch the news like you, and it makes me crazy. And it makes me, but then I shut it all down and say, but what's really going on? What can I do about it? It's like prayer of serenity, right? It sort of comes down to simply, what can I actually change and what can I not? And let me let go of all the things that are really outside of my ability to have an effect.
Right. And that's part of the sleep ritual. I tell people you don't have habits, you have rituals.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about if you run out of toothpaste, what happens? Or somebody moves your hairbrush. In my case, it doesn't matter. But different things like that as people think about it. But we have these daily rituals. And at night, one of the daily rituals I teach people in the book is you should think of all the things that happened today that were positive. Because they're far more positive.
Yeah.
And we focus on those. We make them colorful and bright. We put together a little success reel for ourselves because we don't have cheerleaders.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like that Starbucks commercial where the guy wakes up and everybody's cheering him down the sidewalk. You know, most people they want something from you. They're not against you. That's one thing I try to tell people. They're not against you. They're just for themselves.
Right.
You know, they don't even know you exist, most people.
Yeah.
So we have to be the one looking out for ourselves and realizing that there are positive things that happen, even if they're small things. And our brain is really good at sorting things out and creating programs that make us emit all the positive things, because there's so much negative stuff out there.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, those news agencies scour the world to give us 1 hour of bad news every day, and sometimes they can't fill it.
Yeah.
So they have to replay the old stuff.
Oh, and it repeats all day.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not 24 hours of news. It's like 30 minutes of news,
Right.
you know,
Right.
repeated 24 hours a day, over and over and over and over again. It's a really good point. I know you've got a great technology that we use at our house, Brain Tap. In fact, I've got my son working with it for sports, and, you know, I, on occasion, for some of the sleep issues, which you've got all sorts of programs, and they're really meditations, if you will. But for someone that, you know, do you have to have a technology, you know, to be able to sort of really, you know, have your mind clear and able to feed your body again?
Well, if you're compromised because of stress, then you need something that's you got to fight the force with force. You can't just use a little ball-peen hammer if you need a sledgehammer.
Right.
But if you're in a good place right now, you can do some breathing techniques. In the morning, we always recommend like psychological breathing or something like the Wim Hof breathing techniques, because we need to upregulate. We need to keep that cortisol. Most people, they lose their cortisol at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You should be tired. That's normal.
Yeah.
That's not tea time. The Queen didn't think of that. That's because biologically we're in tune with the sun. They call it the circadian rhythm. It's a time where most cultures would be sleeping. But in America, no way.
Right.
You know, U.S., we got to go. We got to have coffee, tea, sugar, coffee, whatever. We just keep, basically geeking ourselves out with foods when our body needs an electrical reboot.
Yeah.
So then in the afternoon, you can do like box breathing. That's what they teach the Navy SEALs. If you're more stressed than they are, you're one of 6 people going to go take on that battleship. I mean, I don't think so.
Right.
They teach them how to do box breathing. It's very simple. They can go either online to one of my videos and watch that, and then at night do that breath. The breathing is a key. We've proven this at Ames Bhopal. Actually, if they go to PubMed, we've had 22 different publications now that we proved out breathing techniques with Brain Tap, that we can change physiology. We didn't get the psychology department first because they're too stuck in their old paradigms. Talk therapy is not very effective. It's good at first, you need to talk it out.
Yeah.
But they call it revivification. So if I keep talking about my problem, what the brain does is give you a better problem. But if you start talking about the solution, the brain keeps giving you better solutions. So that's why positive psychology. A lot of people are moving away from the old school psychology and moving to what's called positive psychology, which your parents knew and my parents knew, that said, hey, let's start focusing on the solution. Because the brain is a goal-striving organism. But if they don't realize, if you talk about the problem, science now shows it downregulates every DNA pair every 40 seconds. It's not something it's not just long-term, it's immediate.
Yeah.
So when Henry Ford said, when you think you can or think you can't, now neuroscience is saying it's very true. In fact, you'll even handicap yourself. We've all had the experience, we go out to the kitchen and say, where's the salt shaker? And the person in the other room, whether it's husband or wife, says, it's right there on the counter. You say, no, it's not. Finally, they get fed up, they walk out, they show you, it's right there. Wasn't there a minute ago. Because we have, in psychology, they call it sticktoma, which means you can't see the sin in another with a stick in your eye. But the reality is that we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
And usually it's those blind spots. Now we have them physically. We do have a blind spot. You can just take your thumbs and do this and you'll find your blind spot. Yeah. We all have blind spots in our vision, but we also have blind spots in our psychology, our thinking. And so if we don't challenge our own thinking, the unexamined life is not worth living, as they say.
Yeah.
So, every night we should be revisiting, and every morning we should hit the ground running. The devil should be scared you're awake. Hey, oh no, Dell's awake. Where am I going to hide?
I'm doing the best I can to scare the devil,
Yeah.
I tell you. And it's true, and I find myself more and more getting into the motivation when I'm out speaking in public. And one of the things that, I have genuinely turned the tragedies or the things that go really wrong in my life, I now believe that they're just God re-guiding me, right? Just saying, oh no, that's God's taking the wheel and getting me back on course. This was for my benefit. And I sort of say, whether or not that's actually true, I will tell you my life has seen benefit from just not seeing these things as negative, but just saying, oh, I must be off track. Let me just take a step back here and I just need to get back on track and get more success. This is one of those weeks that, you know, honestly, there's a lot of bad news in the space that I've worked very hard at, but got with Aaron and with, you know, different people like Maloney, you start talking, well, what's the positive things? What we got going? What can we do now?
Well, paranoia, this kind of positive paranoia, that's been around since Stoicism. You know, you should pretend as if life is working for you, not against you. In fact, in the Bible, it says all things work for good.
Yes.
You know, so when you think about everything that's happening, I always tell people there's never been a superhero that didn't go through the dark night of the soul. They all have their kryptonite.
Yeah.
So yours just happens to be Congress or whatever. Yeah. You know, but whatever the kryptonite is for you, the end user, it's you know, they know fat, sugar, and all these things, and they want you sitting down, looking at your phones. All these things are contrary to your body's physiology. We should be out moving, we should be in the sun, we should be touching the soil. All the things that nature should bring, all the things I talk about, you can do in nature. You can do it. When you said, do you have to have this brain tap? No, but if you're gonna play in the world, you better have a technology that's gonna bring you back.
Yeah.
I mean, just because, like I showed actually what happens during a flight. When it's online now, where I showed I lost 70% of my energy just flying on an airplane. Because being in the air, every hour in the air is like getting an X-ray. And it affects your mitochondria. This is the energy cell, the power plant of every cell gets affected. Now, most people just call it jet lag. No, it's not jet lag. You were assaulted. Your body was trying to stay balanced.
Yeah.
And it was really light lag, because your body is in tune with the light. That's why we naturally get tired around 10 o'clock at night, because we make more melatonin between 10 and 11. So all these cycles are happening, but we live in a technology world where we can be across the country in 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we get set down and the body's going, what the hell just happened? I was just in, you know, Topeka, Kansas, and now I'm in California. Yeah. What's happening here?
It's such great information. Where do people follow you? You're talking about these videos that you're putting out, and where do we find the book? Like, what's
They can get the book anywhere books are sold.
Okay.
It's taken by Hay House, put it out everywhere.
Yeah.
You can also go to my personal website, drpatrickporter.com, at the bottom of it, or Brain Fitness Blueprint, where they can see some other benefits. I'm everywhere online, so they can just put in my name. But they can go to trybraintap.com and be an N1 study, we call it, a study of one. Most people will start sleeping better tonight. With 2/3 of the world not sleeping, there's a reason they're not able to meditate. You know, it takes energy to sleep. You do more neurological activity when you're sleeping than when you're awake. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not giving your brain a chance. Let's get you sleeping well, get you back on track, and get the better life that you're designed to live.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me today and taking
you.
the time, Dr. Porter. Look, it's really this simple. Are you waking up feeling like life is working to your benefit and that it's beautiful and you're excited about the day? If not, this really is a great book to give you, to find those things that maybe are tripping you up and keeping you from focusing on the positive, and ways to get back to that place so that you are, you know, clear thinking, your nervous system is totally intact, which then watch what happens to all the other things you're trying to do with your health. I really love this book. Patrick, thank you for doing this great work.